Hello everybody, this is Corey Washington, one half of Jupiter Cannons, and I have next to me
EV9.
the other half of Jupiter Cannons. And the purpose of this video podcast is to pretty much outline some of our thoughts and views out there, which you may or may not believe in, but at the same time it does need to be discussed. So what's going to be the first thing on our plate to discuss today?
Where Jimmy's music conceptually should be now, 45 plus years later, bridging the gap between where his mission left off at the time of his, well, as controversial as it seems, he was murdered, y'all.
Yeah.
And his vision was all-inclusive, and he didn't get to complete that.
Right.
And sonically, his music, what he was doing at the time, even around the time that he was, passing, because in my opinion, he was actually dying creatively. He's trying to sustain his creativity, but I could tell he started to, I guess because of his drug use or whatever, and his depression or whatever he's fighting against personally, I saw him begin to physically deteriorate within the last 4 to 6 months of his life. Actually, maybe by 1969.
And we were just listening to the Band of Gypsies, the new release, the first show that's been released in its entirety for the first time. And you were kind of remarking, why isn't this played on black radio? And it's like we could get into a whole thing on that, but it's really a good question to ask because we heard some funky music, some stuff that needs to be on black radio, that needs to be branched out there for the general public, but mainly for African Americans who are so used to listening to a certain type of music, which really constricts their mental capabilities, so to speak.
Case in point, they wanted to not only psychologically but mentally ghettoize black youth in particular, and anything that was expansive during that period and since that period was considered, quote unquote, white people's music and only reserved for white people.
It's kind of interesting because a lot of the themes of Jimmy's music, I think we talked about this earlier, started to get more political. Not political in the sense of a Republican, a Democrat, an independent type political, but more or less of challenging the status quo, which at that time consisted of the Vietnam War. Now, when you listen to his lyrics in Machine Gun, he has things in there such as a mother sending their only child off to die, things of that nature that affected all people, but definitely African Americans who died in Vietnam at alarming rates. So what is your views on Jimmy's music as far as his message behind it and how that could have maybe even affected the black ghetto youth in the inner cities?
In my opinion, Jimmy's entire consciousness began to be more centered around what he felt his purpose was. In my opinion, it probably began after Martin Luther King was assassinated because it affected him personally. Although he never met Martin, he was definitely deeply affected by it. And I felt that he, in the Christian world, picked up his cross. He bared his cross from that point onward, and he began to change, at least internally, but from what I've noticed, it began maybe toward the end of '68. Began to change his focus. He wanted, by the time he had the experience had disbanded in late '68, when he was over in New York and they went back to England, and they reformed at the beginning of '69, and they started to tour. He was calling this stuff electric church music. So he was going toward a more spiritual concept, and that's when the love message began to take hold. And I think he had a politicized love message, which was all-inclusive.
The irony is not lost on us that when Martin Luther King started criticizing the Vietnam War and started shifting a lot of his focus from civil rights to economic causes and poor people's plight, that's probably when he really popped up on the radar of the U.S. government. So I would say the same thing with Jimi Hendrix. I think when Star Spangled Banner was played in a certain way at Woodstock, it was a world stage unlike no other at that time. You had the Star Spangled Banner, this cherished song of the establishment, played in an unorthodox way, showing really how Jimmy said it was in the air with the bombs and the chaos. It was not really a fun time, so to speak, in America. And so you had that dynamic, and then on top of that, you had his praise for the Black Panthers at that time, making statements. So you had all of this involved, and then next thing you know, Jimmy's dead. I mean, it could be a number of reasons, but that's one I would add to the pot along with the Michael Jeffrey stuff. So, there's a lot of stuff. We probably could have a whole nother show on that, really.
And we should.
Yeah. So just to put the focus back on Jimi Hendrix, his music should be played on black radio top to bottom. There's formats for it. There's the oldies that he could be played on that. There's jazz that could be played on that. There's easy listening. He could be played on that. There's just so many, formats for his music, but yet and still, you don't have the DJs with the power to do what they want to do. So, this is also encouraging those DJs out there in college radio. They could step their game up a little bit. I know we had Gary Tyson, who's not on the air anymore. He was doing his thing. Ricky Vincent out in Berkeley, Oakland, he does his thing. He's got a show coming up in November where he showcases Jimmy's music. But there's so many, online radio stations out there that this stuff can get to the masses without mainstream. But I think that they have to take that challenge up. So.
And I'd like to add, Funkadelic's music wasn't played on black radio either. So obviously there seems to be a program that said, hey, look, you guys can do what you're doing, but we're not going to promote it to the masses. So Funkadelic's fate until Not Just Knee Deep, which was really, in my opinion, a Parliament tune. It didn't have any of the Funkadelic elements in there. Until 1979, 1980, Funkadelic was not played on mainstream radio. For the same reasons why Jimmy wasn't played on mainstream black radio.